Okay, we are live.
Hi everyone.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Natalie. Welcome to the conference of Pedro Medeiros. Yeah,
Yeah.
almost. Who will show us your pixel art workflow? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about the more like technical aspects of pixel art. I think I will talk a little bit about like the actual drawing and everything, but I think it's more about like how to make pixel art like that really works in the context of a game.
Okay. So can you introduce yourself for people who don't know you?
Sure. I am Pedro Medeiros, and I'm a pixel artist. I am probably most known for my work in Celeste,
Yeah.
Towerfall, and other games out there somewhere, the Dungeons of Doom, and a bunch.
Okay.
And I also did a bunch of pixel art tutorials that I post online on my Patreon or just on Twitter and everything. And and yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, that's,
Like,
that's very good. So I think we can start with your workflow. Maybe you can share your screen and
sure.
screen.
Let me just a second.
So everybody, if you have any question in French or in English, you can ask it. Pedro will try to answer when he can, and yeah, I will. I can
How do
translate any question you have in French or in English. So please feel free to ask anything. And all right, um, everything is ready for me.
Yeah. So let me just see. Where's my cursor? No, just a second. Yeah, I have this.
Sorry,
So yeah.
it's my dog.
So yeah, I want to start about like talking about like this pixel art workflow, which is I'll start with the tools that I usually use or think people should know and everything. One of the most like more modern tools for pixel art right now it's a Sprite, which is like a really good pixel art editor. Have like a lots of like very useful time saving features. There's a lot of like tools and everything inside. It's really good. It's a paid editor and it's the one I use on a regular basis. But other editors are also very useful. There's no like right tool for pixel art. I think it's probably like if you're used to something, you probably should keep using that. But just in case you don't know, here are some others. There's the graphic scale, which is like a classic one. It's also very professional. There's Pixel, which is with spell like this, which is like an online tool. It's also very interesting. It's free. It's not as robust as graphic scale, Sprite, and other ones, but it's also very interesting. A lot of people use Photoshop for pixel art too. I think it's a little bit of overkill, but if you already use Photoshop for other stuff, you might as well keep using it. And I've seen like a lot of professionals using like Microsoft Paint, the old one, and other simple tools and other like retro tools and everything. And I think while those are very interesting and some people already use them for so long that they are like have them like embedded in them basically, uh, they usually just keep working on that. But if you're just starting out, I really don't recommending you going for one of those because it's like they usually it's just like you won't get as much from the tool itself. If you're just learning out one, you might as well learn the most like the more modern one, and I would recommend a Sprite for that. On the more technical side, it's also important for I think for a pixel artist that's working with games to know other stuff around the pixel art itself, right? So learning to use like Sublime Text, Visual Studio Code, or some other text editor that's not like Notepad. It's also useful, like because you'll be like using depending on the game engine, depending on the game that you'll be working, you'll be using XML, you'll be using JSON or other like data-driven language or something. So you gotta learn at least a little bit of these. Also, depending on the game engine you'll be working with, you should know at least the basics of Unity, Unreal, or if it's just like a XNA thing or something. So, so at least the very basic, you should be able to like put your art in the game. Like if you finish a sprite or something, you should be able to like to at least like test it a little bit. And the third thing that I think it's also useful is Git. I mean, I say Git here, but any version, any type of version control your team uses. This is um, this is a thing that if you don't know what Git is, it's just like a tool for sharing files. It's basically like kind of like almost like a Dropbox basically, but you have like you choose to send and receive files and everything. So if you're working on a big team, um it's not even a big team. If you're working with two people, you need some kind of version control that will you will be able to send and receive stuff. So it's very important. It's kind of hard to learn. Honestly, it's a little bit annoying. And and for the tools, I think that's basically it. There are many other pixel art editors. There's Pixel Edit, Pixel spelled with an Y, which is really good for tile sets. For example, there's even like Krita and other um, image editor. They also have like pixel art capabilities and stuff like that. But in general, those are my favorite ones. Um, no, after the two, like some I would like to start by asking like why do pixel art in the first place? Why would you do like a game in pixel art today? Like writing. Um, First reason I think is just because it looks good. I think pixel art is like an interesting aesthetic. It's it's just a style that for me it's like just pleasing to look at. And another reason people usually do is like nostalgia. Honestly, I'm not a big one on nostalgia. I think nostalgia is a little um I think kind of I want to say cheap, but it's not necessarily cheap. It's just like nostalgia. Just like you cannot make a whole. Usually, you cannot make a whole game just on nostalgia. You know, it's too weak to hold a game like an art style together. So uh, that's why I think pixel art is not good if you're just going for that. But I think it's good if you go use it like as other good things that you had. Like for example, pixel art is highly like impressionist. Like it's basically like if you look like impressionism art in general, it kind of you will see a lot of patterns that it repeats in pixel art. You know, like the big like chunks of color. If you look up close, it doesn't really make all the sense. But if you look from far away, you can start to see the picture. So I think if we look pixel art more as a medium than as a dated style, it's you can do more interesting things with it. Um, Other stuff is like on the production side. Pixel art is very fast. It's very fast compared to like regular high resolution art. To make like an animation like this, I'm not sure if you can see like an animation like this. Oh, it's right under the main. It's fine. To make like a character swinging a sword and doing everything like these characters here, to animate them in pixel art was like I don't know half an hour for each animation or not even that, just because it's so small. It's like you can just keep making like frame by frame really fast. So in the production standpoint is it's very useful to have like a fast style. It's easy to iterate. Like if you want to change something, you also is again it's not as hard to change because like if you want to change colors, it's relatively easy. Since everything is so chunky and is very modular, right? So if you see this tile set here on the back, it's actually it's made like this. Like the center of the tile, for example, is like a tiled image, and the border is just a bunch of like edge edge tiles that I've just pasted everything together. If this was high resolution, that effect would be so hard to achieve because everything would need to line up perfectly. But lining up things in pixel art is so easy because the pixels are huge, so everything becomes like modular. So this scene here in high resolution would be, I don't know, 10 times more difficult to make than like in pixel art, in my opinion. And there are situations, of course, where pixel art is not that great. It's really bad at scaling. If you see these two circles here, oh, it's fine. Yeah, like the circles here, like this is the circle is like scaled at, I don't know, like two times, like let's say this is the original size of the sprite. This is like twice the sprite, and this is one and a, I don't know, 7. So it's like if this was a high resolution image, scaling like this would be fine. But since it's pixel art, you can see that all the borders are all crumbly and breaking. So scaling pixel art is just not that easy. There are algorithms that help with that, but none of them really. It's just a physical problem. It's impossible. Rotating, I think it's maybe even worse than scaling sometimes. You can see like this little slar here is like completely destroyed when I rotated like 45 degrees, and 45 degrees is a good angle to rotate. So yeah, skeletal animation is just like those animations that you have like bones and you have like a bunch of slices of characters, and then you move them with you moving the bones and everything, which is a really good production tool for high resolution. But for pixel art, uh, while it is possible, and I've seen, and this is for a skeletal animation that I did in pixel art, it's just not that good. It's just since you'll be rotating and scaling everything a lot, everything will be broken, and yeah, it is possible. It is useful sometimes, but it's just not as good.
May I
And
ask something?
sure, go ahead. No.
You so about rescaling and rotation, and
Hmm.
when you have to do it in pixel art, what do you do to?
Yeah,
I mean, if you must do it, do you draw everything again, or instead of rescaling, or?
I think it's a question usually of scope. If
Okay.
I have the time and the scope of doing it, like for example, if a character needs to roll, like jump and roll, and I need to rotate the character or for that specific animation. So yes, I would redraw the character for every single frame,
Hmm.
for every like rotating every single frame. So Celeste has some like some spikes that rotate. For example, when you every now and then they rotate,
Okay.
and they are rotated like hand like frame by frame. Just hand draw
Okay.
each. Yeah, it's just because. But if I would have, for example, a character that can, I don't know, need to like if I need to rotate the whole thing, I will have to rotate all the sprites in every single that's not possible, right?
Okay.
So I would just say, okay, just destroy the pixel art. That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes you don't have a solution. You have just to like just rotate it and let it be. So, but you know it's going to be rotated, so you could like at least like avoid things like this. You see like this little detail here on the ear, which is like a 1 pixel line. This kind of
Mm.
things rotate especially bad. You see like here, like how it breaks. So if you have like big chunks of color, then
Mm.
it's better on the rotation, you know. So yeah, if you know the sprite is going to be rotated, then you would just use try to use like chunks of color that are big or scaling. The same rules apply with scaling. But but yeah, I remember I think wasn't Skyturn, I don't remember, or Celeste. At some point of the game, we decided to rescale the whole thing. So I went back and we redrew all the sprites
Oh,
in
okay.
a slightly different size, and it was very annoying. Yeah, I think it was in Celeste. There was the monster sprite. We rescaled it I think twice,
Oh, okay.
and, and we had to just redraw the whole thing like from scratch. And it's just because like it wouldn't work if we rotate it, like just scaled it in the game. It would just look like the thing.
Yeah, okay.
And the last thing, text and localization, is just to again, this is the one is not like impossible. It's just like a little bit annoying because it's kind of hard to do um to represent stuff if you have like a very low resolution. So like Chinese characters, even Latin characters that have like a bunch of accents, those characters sometimes are hard to do in pixel art. And even if you have them, it's very hard to find a pixel art font that already has it, all of those. So you probably will need to draw your own like characters for every single language you have. So so yeah, so text and localization is usually a hard thing to do in pixel art. But again, possible is just more work involved. Um, oh, and feel free to like to interrupt me with any questions.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay, okay.
So things that when we start a new game, like when you start like okay, I'll start a new project. Um, if you're starting from like the very start, like you're starting a completely new game, things here are some things that I will go through each one of those now. But there are some things they should prepare before the game. First, usually you need to have like some concept art, some reference, something to start from your game. Like this is on the back here is like some concept art we did for Towerfall. Those are from Amora. This is mine. Um, when we started the game, we have a bunch of characters, so we started by like a more like actually started by doing some pixel art sketches, and then Amora did some concept art, and we went like back and forth with that. But things like this is always useful to have. Like you have like at least like some, so you can kind of see the vibe you're going for. Is this going to be cartoony? Is this going to be serious? Is this going to be, I don't know. Then you need to know like your resolution, your colors, and then we start with a mocap. Let's start one by one. About resolution. Resolution is incredibly annoying to work with, and it's very hard because it's a problem. There's no easy solution for it. Celeste, for example, it's like 320 by 180 resolution. Why? Because the Nintendo Switch is 1280 by 200 to 720p. So what does it mean? So basically, it's the thing. Scaling pixel art, like I said, it's annoying because you can only scale by integers. We say it's like if I have a pixel art that's 16 by 16 and I want to show it on the screen, I need to rescale it to I don't know 32 by 32, 64 by 64, any multiples that are integer. I cannot rescale it to I don't know 72 by 72 or it will be broken. So when you draw a sprite, like sorry, the game screen, you have to draw it in a resolution that it's you can divide your like target resolution, which is your like console, your game, your I don't know, like your PC, by an integer number. For example, here Switch, it has like this resolution of 1280 by 720. You can divide it by two and have 640 by 360, or by 3 and have like 427 by 240, or by 4, which is the one 320 by 180. which is what we did by Celeste for Celeste. So when you render the game on the Switch on Celeste for Celeste, we rescaled it 4 times, I think. And Towerfall also has like a similar resolution, it's a little taller. So and other games that I worked on, like Out There Somewhere, has like this weird resolution that I don't know where I came with up with this. I just threw a number, and this caused me so many problems later because I could not rescale this to any other place. So I would just have to deal with that. So yeah,
Um,
sometimes.
Sorry, before you move on, if you could come back to the concept art section which you were talking about, someone asked, how do you choose which sacrifice to do from concept to pixel art?
Oh,
If you have a concept art who is too complicated,
mhm.
what do you choose to keep in pixel art?
I think I will come back to that later because
Okay,
I will revisit the concept art thing.
okay.
Okay. Um, but yeah. So about the scaling for now, it's like when you rescale, sometimes you just have to like basically butcher it. Sometimes there's no choice. So for example, in Towerfall, the resolution, like I said, is like 320 by 240. That's not a resolution that works on for most televisions. So we have our monitors because it's very very tall. So what do? We just put like a border around it. I would avoid like a black border. Deep Dungeons of Doom, another game that I worked with, we just did that too because that happens. This is like a mobile game, so we could not know the final resolution. So that's the thing that we would need. So adding a border kind of helps sometimes. Sometimes like for in the case like out there somewhere, this one I just didn't do anything. I just rescaled the whole thing to the screen and hoped it looked good. It usually didn't look that good, but well, because sometimes there's no easy solution. Other thing, I think Terraria does that, which is you can just instead of you can change the size of the like the viewport of your game, like the camera of your game, depending on the monitor. But that depends a lot on what style of game you're making. And oh yeah, in some cases, if you have just like a little bit, it's just like 1 pixel wrong, like for this resolution, which is like 1/3 of the switch, for example, it's not actually 4:7, it's like 4:6.6666. So you can just make it 4:7 and make that extra pixel like just go in the borders. It's kind of something like that. You can do that, but again, uh, it's not usually something that you need to worry about a lot when it's like such a small error. And is there any questions about the resolution thing? I don't think so, right?
I'm not sure it's like very about resolution, but someone is asking, how do you match the low res game with the high res portraits? It's at the minimum
Oh,
resolution for the entire
yeah,
game.
like in Celeste, right?
Yeah.
So the game itself is rendered to a very small canvas, and we scale it to like a big texture. Um, all the UI and everything is rendered on the actual uh, game resolution, which is the screen of the game, and that's rendered on top of that stretched gameplay image. That's like the technical side. On the um, on the side of um, on the art side, let's say how we do it is mostly we try to use like a similar color palette and everything, so it kind of blends a little bit together. And we also try to keep it everything like extremely consistent. We Everything in the game world is always the same resolution. Everything in the game is very low resolution and exactly the resolution of the that we're using. Everything in the UI is high resolution, and we will never have a pixel art image showing up on the UI because that would break the consistency. and we'll never have a high resolution image or even a slightly different resolution image showing up in the game, because again, that would break the resolution. And we try to keep all that consistent. Like for example, in Celeste, the menus, like the main menu is high resolution. There's even a 3D mounting, and we at some point needed like a sprite of Madeline falling, and I think we initially thought about just putting the pixel right there, but it would look it just we couldn't do that because like the rules are the main menu is high resolution. We cannot mix it, so we would have redraw everything again with we did a little version of her in high resolution just for that. So that's it. Like if you keep consistency, you can have both usually. Um, Here now about I think I just saw a new question here too. Sorry
Yeah.
about manually rescaling sprites. I think this is a cool question. So it's just that we usually don't scale sprite by sprite. We just do everything. Like if you see Celeste running on the actual uh, resolution of the game, it's just like a tiny thing. It's like it's so tiny. The whole game like runs in a little square in the corner of the screen, and then we scale the whole game. We don't scale
Hmm.
sprite by sprite because otherwise you would have two different. We could have a situation where two different sprites have like one pixel is here, other pixel is here, and they are kind of halfway on each other, and that's like something that we don't like. So if you draw everything in a tiny canvas and then scale the whole thing, you'll never have that. All the pixels they snap pixel by pixel. So yeah. So moving on from that, the next step that I like to work with is the colors. I I'm very unorganized with colors, to be honest. I'm terrible with that. But when you start a new project or something, you usually um, need to have like at least some idea of how many colors, of what color style you'll be using. If you're doing like a game that's very retro or something, you probably want to do like a limited color palette, maybe 16 colors, 8 colors, 4 colors, or even one color, just black and white. But usually it's the thing that you decide before starting the game, because while changing colors in pixel art is relatively easy, it's a little uh, counterproductive to, to do so. So yeah, start by asking a few questions like how strict your color palette. That's probably the first thing that you should ask. Like if you're going for nostalgia, um, I would avoid getting the exact color palette of an old console. I see a lot of people doing stuff like, oh, I want to do like a very retro pixel art game. So they go and Google Nintendo palette, and they just use that. I think usually that's a really bad idea. Unless again, all of those like rules that I'm saying, unless if you know what you're doing, if you really want to use Nintendo palette, just go. It's just like I'm just laying some general rules. If you're not very sure what you're to do next. But yeah, but again, getting uh, color palettes from like actual consoles like Nintendo, Game Boy, and everything, it's usually a bad idea because those colors they were chosen not for their like artistic value, but usually it's something related to the actual console limitations. So they are usually kind of too saturated or too repetitive, um, stuff like that. So I would avoid doing that. Sprite, for example, has some really good color palettes that you can choose. There's also that website called Los. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Lospack. There's a link there, and they have like a huge selection of palettes, and it's so good. It's so good. and you can just browse it and choose a palette if you don't want to create one. You can also create one, which is also really cool. You can start using. There's a bunch of palette creation tools, or you can just wing it. Just choose color by color. Oh, and there's sometimes, for example, Skytorn had that. Uh, I I started with a somewhat limited palette, and I would be adding new colors every time I needed one, and I would keep that for new sprites. Um, so it was like a more of like a flexible palette. Sometimes you want to do that if you're not going for really like an retro look or a very strict look. So you
Um,
can do like a general palette.
we have a
Is
question from
sure.
Igor. He want to ask, what do you think about the Pico 8 palette?
Oh, I think it's great. The
Okay.
Pico 8 palette is really good. It, so Pico 8 it's an interesting case because it emulates. It's almost like a try. It's like a fantasy console. So they chose their colors uh, to 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 emulate a technical limitation, right? So it's like just it's 8 colors, 16 colors, I think. So just 16 colors. So but they chose it very carefully to be 16 very useful colors. So it's really cool. Oh yeah, I think there's an extended palette too, which is even more interesting. Um, but yeah, Pico 8 is great. Um, and there's another thing too, which is you should keep in mind when you add colors to your palette. Every time you add a color, in theory, the right thing to do is kind of go back to your previous sprites that you already did for the game and revisit them and see if that new color that you just added will fit on any of those. Because that's in theory how it would work, right? Because if you have a new color, there's no reason why not using the previous sprites. And yeah, and after you know your resolution and your basic colors, now it's time for making the mocap. This is, in my opinion, probably one of the most important steps in when you're developing like a new game or something. Eh, it's basically you know the size of your screen, kind of. You know the style of colors, and now you just draw the game. Basically, you just make a fake screenshot. Just do a little um, scene of your game. Try to not make like maybe anything especially important. Like for example, this is Skyturn actually. The game itself turned out to be very different, but but all these are mockups for Skyturn. I'm not sure if you can see, but for example, this one is it's higher. It has a higher resolution. I think each tile is 32 by 32 or 16. This one is very tiny. This is like an 8 by 8 tile. This is the one that we ended up using. I think. Oh, actually, this one is the one we ended up using. I think this is 12, 10, and this is 12 pixel tiles. I'm not sure, but the point is, I tested many resolutions and before committing to it. So, whoops. So, so yeah. So, and I try to draw like a very like a common scene in the game, like just uh, just some I don't know the overworld of the game, a little bridge, some grass. I try to not overcomplicate it because kind of that's the point. We don't want to draw. This is the point of this image is not to do like a beautiful illustration. Is to just see if in a boring scene your game can still hold it. You know. I think my oh, okay, sorry. That screen on my tablet's turned on. And let me just turn it off. Got it. Um, And yeah, so you start by doing this, and 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 then this will be very, very useful in the future. You'll be able to like use this as a color picker. For example, I usually have like the mockup that I do for the game in another window or something, and then when I need the color and I say, oh, what is the color of the grass, and then I just go to the mockup and get that color and put it in the asset that I'm working with. um, for characters too, so I like when I draw a new asset, I will just draw on the mockup. If I want to like draw a new character, I will not draw in a blank canvas, just because then I have nothing to compare it with. So I would like, use the mockup as a base, and yeah. So yeah, like here, for example, you see like this is like for those there's some like blob monsters in Celeste. So this is like the very first um, concept for it, like mockup. So yeah, so this is a screenshot of the game. That's another thing. If you already have the game, at some point you stop using the mockup and you start using like a screenshot of your game. So you draw on top of the screenshot, so you can have like all the context.
Someone is asking if you create palette for level 2, or like
mm,
every new level you create a new palette or not?
to be honest, no, but I should. Mm. Creating palettes for levels, it's a good idea. It's a really good idea. Um, I'm a little lazy when it comes to palettes, so I don't usually work with strict palettes. I think I every now and then end up like breaking the color limits anyway, so I don't usually have like a strict palette. What I do is to I have like a little image sometimes, which is like a very, very simple concept art of the level. Usually, sometimes not even in pixel. It's just like a very, very rough painting, and that painting has some general tones for the color. So I start a new level. I do like a tiny painting of what the level should be, just to get the mood in colors, and that's kind of my base. But and then from that I kind of extrapolate the palette.
Um,
Uh,
and Luar is asking, is it okay to use a palette from Lospec in games? Like, is there copyright for someone else's palette colors?
I don't think there are. I don't think you can copyright palette
Yeah,
colors, because it's just colors.
yeah.
But I think those palettes specifically, they have a license that says it's
Oh.
fine to use. Just to yeah, yeah, just to be sure. I'm not sure. I think they are completely open for free for use. But even, I mean, you cannot copyright colors, so it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think it's um bad or anything. I think the people like who make palettes, they usually just make them available directly for everyone to use it.
Hmm.
And another thing, other than mockup, sometimes character sheets are also a useful thing to do. Like here in Skytorn, when I was choosing the main character, and in Towerfall, when we were designing new archers and everything. So I like just drawing sprites side by side. Uh, you see, like Towerfall is like an older game. So I wasn't that used to drawing on mockups or screenshots like I do now. But at least I already was like drawing everything side by side, so I could compare from like each character with the other character that I already had. But
Um,
you can see Skyturn, which is a later game. I did that on the mockup.
Kroto, I've had a question about that, about the size. What do you think is the best size for a sprite character to begin?
Hmm. So that will depend on your resolution. You have to see. it really depends on both on resolution and the game. What we usually do to decide on the character size is first we decide the game resolution, at least roughly, and then we decide what's the size of the character on the screen. For example, like in somewhere the character has like 1 tile high, which again is my first game. That's not a great idea, but it worked. Um, on Celeste and Towerfall, I think it's 1.5 or almost 2 tiles high. Uh, the height of 2 tiles almost. So usually we decide based on tiles or in reference with other things and kind of the size of the character in the screen. We kind of look at the screen and decide from that. And then you see what size the character will be. I think Madeline is probably around 10 by 20, like the canvas. The actual character must be like 10 by 14, 12, maybe 15. I don't know. And yeah, and Skytron is a little bit bigger. I honestly don't remember, but I would guess, I don't know, 20 by 16 or 12. So yeah, that varies a lot. Oh yeah, someone said that Madeline is 16 tall and the hitbox is 11 pixel tall. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, so I think in Skytron she's a little bit higher, little bit taller. It's probably like 18 something. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah. So the character size vastly depends on what your resolution is and what's the size of your hitbox and everything. Okay. Moving on. So one last thing that I wasn't sure where to put this slide actually, but I think that it's always good to remember is when you export images for your game, you should always know that you can never compress pixel art. The PNG format is probably one of the best formats for exporting pixel art because it has some compression, but it never changes anything because pixel art is so exact. If you save a pixel art as JPEG, it looks like this. This is like a especially bad case I did for as an example, but if you try to compress pixel art, it will be destroyed, and you cannot work on this again. If you have this image here on the right, you wanna go back to this, you have to hand draw it because you don't have the information anymore. So always save your pixel art as at least a PNG. Uh, Ideally, you should always have I don't know, a Sprite file saved, or if you're doing Photoshop, your Photoshop file saved, or your original file. But when exporting to the game or saving, stick with PNG. Vector also is not ideal. Some people I saw, unless you really know what you're doing, like I'm going to do this weird pixel art that's a vector thing that will be printed. Uh, Vector is not good for pixel art because it's it is not built for that. You would have like a bunch of small squares here, and that would not scale to the screen well. And yeah, it just would be completely very weird. I mean, again, it is possible, but it's just not good, especially for games. If you're doing this, I mean, vector for pixel art, it's possible for printing, but for games, it's just no. Um, Again, when you finish an animation in pixel art, there are mostly like two things that you can do. You can export an image sequence of PNGs or a sprite sheet, usually a PNG too, which sprite sheet, which is just like one sprite side by side, and then the engine would cut it and animate it for you. So it's just something to be aware. So never compress your pixel art. um, let me see. All right, so now I will try to talk about. I will go one by one again, explaining how do I work with each of element of the game with pixel art. I think the things that require pixel art usually are one of these. Are they either entities in the game, which are player characters, pick up coins, whatever. Tile sets, which are usually background stuff, things that are even UI. Sometimes we use tile sets. We have usually some kind of background or foreground panels, which are basically paintings, really big images usually. We have decals. Decals, it's basically props, usually just like kind of relatively big images that we place them on the back or in the front just to decorate the level. Almost like entities, but they usually are more focused on just decoration. And by and then we also have particles and other special effects, which are just effects. Let's start with sprites. So here's about the we can start about how we usually we start a sprite, right? So we usually start with I say story, but it's basically a briefing, some kind of text, some kind of idea, like, oh, it's an archer which is have white hair, and she's something. A bird that tells you stuff, and you know, it's just like some kind of briefing that you have before starting the sprite. It's like the purpose of the sprite. And see, my cat is screaming. Uh, and then I usually do a pixel art, a rough like sketch or something, and then we do the concept art, like a actual concept art. So that's kind of the. Let me show Ezzy. People are asking her, Ezzy, Vinka, Vinka. He's running away now. That's Ezzy. He's the one that screams the whole day. He never stops screaming. So, all right. So back to the pixel art. We so yeah. So about the concept art. Sometimes the concept art will come before the pixel art. Sometimes the pixel art will come before the concept art, which is kind of weird if when you think, because why would you do the pixel art before the concept art? Why would you even do a concept art after you already have the sprite? It's usually because if you are working with a really low resolution like Towerfall, for example, you would be so limited to the space we had. There is not much we could do. So if Amora gave me a concept art of some very complicated thing, um, that would be probably lost in the actual sprite. So what we did is we started with one of these, like this. This is for the white archer, for example. We started with one of these character sheets, and I would just do a bunch, and then she would do like the concept art, which is something like this, and then I would revisit the pixel art based on that concept art and redo it everything basically. Um, so so yeah, that and sometimes I would go bounce like more times, even like 3 or 4 times sometimes, because what we were trying to do is to create like a oops no okay create like a pixel art that really works in the game, but also tells a story and has everything around it working. So I call it like a non-linear concept art process. I don't know. It's just something that we do. Like, so that's how I usually work with complicated concept art. So it's important that in-game readability. I'm not sure if I can pronounce this. And the function of it is way more important than the actual concept art, because the concept art is there to help you with the sprite, right? So yeah, sometimes you just have to like butcher the concept art. Oh, the concept art has like 10 arms. You cannot draw 10 arms in 8 by 8 resolution. So you just don't.
Tiago is asking, how do you choose when to use outline or not?
Outlines are great for creating contrast. We use outlines when the character and the background are usually not distinct enough. We I personally like to avoid outlines, but I end up using in every single game I do because my colors. I feel that sometimes when I use outline, let's see if I like it's the last here. I use out an outline on her because sometimes it's hard to differentiate her from the background, and since she's so small and fast, and she's always like jumping around, so we need the player to be able to see her very easily. So yeah, that's when we choose to do it. Like Towerfall also uses outline. This thing, yeah, we use outlines in a very thick one, so it's very obvious when the player where the player is. What I try to do when I do use the outlines is to keep outlines for important objects. For example, here you see the arrow has an outline. This block it moves, so it has an outline. But the king in the background doesn't do anything. He only stays there and laughs at you when you die. So the king doesn't have an outline. So it's basically, if I have an outline, it's a signal of this thing is interactive, basically. Um, but I feel that in the future I wanna avoid outlines because they also, while they're good for that, they also create like a very chunky look. It's like everything kind of has outline. Everything kind of gets too noisy and a lot of black lines everywhere. Uh, yeah. Mm, Another thing to consider too when you're doing your sprites is how many animations you need, and how complex the character is. So you should think of that before starting it. Like Skytorn, she had a shovel in her hand, and at some point of the game we were thinking maybe she can have another like a bunch of weapons and stuff, and then we look at all the animation we would have to do, and we said like no, we're not doing that. um so so basically it is important for you to know how complex your character is and how much content you can do around that character, because you have to plan it accordingly before starting everything. Because if you know your character will have like to change weapons all the time or point up and down like in Towerfall, I would not draw this character in Towerfall with the bow in the hands, like within one single image. I made it modular because I knew how complex this were going to be. Stuff like that. You need to think about like, will I be able to do all of this in the time that I have? So try to always like reduce the complexity of the animations when you can. And about the collision is another thing that's important. When you're drawing a character, you need to think about what's the collision box of that character. You can see this guy here has like I don't remember the collision box of this character. I just put collision box that I think it is or something. But the collision, I see some people when they start making games, they do a collision that's like kind of like here, like around the character. So if you touch any of these corners here, you would be hit by the enemy or something like that. That's usually not a good idea. You want most of the time a collision that is smaller than a sprite. Um, Usually you remove legs and arms and the top of the head from the collision. So you see that the guy had like, and also you need to know what the style of the collision you have. For example, uh, in a 3D game, or fighting game, for example, you have like this very precise collision. That's usually not the case with like platformers or top-down games. So, so if you know your collision is going to be square, you can kind of draw the character around that. So it's always important to know that. One exception is usually collectibles, like gems and everything. They usually have a collision that's bigger than them. Things that help the player usually have a collision bigger than the sprite. The player in everything that's bad to the player usually have a very very smaller collision than the player. All right. Anything else about entities or something? Can I?
Mm, no, I think you can move on.
Okay. So tile sets. Tile sets is another core element of making art like Pixar. Um, and the thing that's usually very useful. Tile sets are basically these little sets that we draw for making the background and the scenery where the characters will walk usually. Especially useful for platformers, but top-down games, pretty much any pixel art game. Not like most pixel art games will use at least some kind of a tile set. So you can reuse parts, chunks of scenery. The idea of tile sets is to have like this sheets like this, and then you can place them where the like solid collisions and everything. And just a second. We like this is on the right is like a palette that I did for out there somewhere, and and it's a weird tile set because it's a tile set that was designed to be hand placed. So I was picking like one tile by tile and placing it in the game, which is interesting and looks very unique, but at the same time it's a little bit very tiresome. This is I think that in this game I use also an automatic tile set. I'm not sure, but the point is that you can also design tile sets that are for like an automatic placement. Celeste uses that. Skytarn uses that. Um, those you create a little like a based on a template. You create all the possible combinations you can have, and then you write a code that will choose the correct tile for each tile, basically. Uh, there are a lot of tools that can help. I just found out about an app called, I think it's called Tilesetter. I haven't tested properly, but helps you to create like this templates. Um, but it is something that my advice would be honestly to just Google it, like Google like starting how to do a tile set or something, and and then there will be like a bunch of templates. There are many different techniques of doing tile sets. Um, I used a bunch of different ones. If I remember correctly, Towerfall had a very simple tile set that would have a bunch of one-piece tiles that would be placed everywhere where the tile set couldn't decide exactly. what it should do. Celeste has a more robust one that has like a little bit more cases. And Skytarn, we did something different, which is we just had like a centerpiece and a corner piece. Sorry, an edge piece, and that edge piece would be rotated and placed everywhere, and a ton of variation for all of those. So there are many styles of tile sets that you can do. That will depend a lot on the game, and just tile sets are a very very complicated thing that you can study a lot if you want. So I'll keep that one. And next is foreground and background panels. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about this, about color here. When doing tile sets or backgrounds, is all again very very important to think about color, because you have to compare them with your sprites that you made. So you need to make sure that the sprites they pop up. You can see the sprites in the game properly, and they don't like conflict with the background. Sometimes I think in Celeste, sometimes I saw when I see some people playing the game and they sometimes mistake something in the background for something that you can collide with. I always get sad because that's kind of what, oh no, I failed that, because that's a thing that cannot happen, because the player should always be able to differentiate like what's foreground, what's background, what's collidable, what's not, kind of by intuition alone. So color is very very important for this. For this background, for making background and foregrounds, usually there's no there aren't many rules here, which is one of the most like relaxing parts of making art, I think, is just make a big painting, just draw a huge sky and put it in the back. One thing that you can do, which is really cool, is to make parallax. Parallax is probably one of my favorite things about video games. I always say all my games must have parallax and particles. Those are my two favorite things actually on video games. Parallax is a process that you do, which is you draw the background like this, like I drew like this cloud, this cloud, this clouds, a bunch of trees and grass, and then you scroll them at different speeds when your character, your camera moves. So your camera moves. I was going to simulate parallax. It's basically like it's just this. You see, like when I move my hand on the back moves lower than my hand in the front. That's it. That's parallax. And that creates a lot of depth in pixel art. It feels almost like 3D, and it's very useful. Another thing to consider when doing backgrounds, sometimes they have to tile. So I just added a bunch of backgrounds from Skytarn here. So you can see like this side and this side, they kind of tile. They would, if I put like this image next to it, it would tile like perfectly. The same here for these clouds here. If I put this cloud here again, you would keep going. So things like this are useful. You should always think about it, like having images that tile next to each other when you need it. Mm. And now decals. Okay. Wait, there's a question here. How do you leave character behind a wall in an isometric view? I think in isometric styles, when you have, or even like in platform and everything, if you have things behind walls and everything. Usually you need to have some kind of an indication that the character is there, or if that's a thing that you need. Like every information you need to convey to the player needs to be there visually too. So maybe outlines showing or something, stuff like that can help. Some games have like a shadow or an outline or something. And
Someone asked about if you want to talk about dithering and anti-aliasing.
I think yeah, sure. Dithering is a technique to like faking transparency and more colors through the use of like a almost like a cross hatch in pixel art. It's sometimes used very useful like in backgrounds when you don't have like if your game doesn't use like a partial alpha we call I think I should go a little back. So yeah, when you're deciding the colors of your game, you should decide if your game is going to use transparency or not in general. Like, are you going to use like half tones and stuff like that? Are you going to use only uh, full transparency or no transparency? Stuff like that. If you are not using half transparency, dithering is a good way to fake that if you need it. But yeah, dithering is also very it's a little dangerous to use G3, especially if you use it too much because it gets very, very noisy. And everything kind of starts to get like hard to read after a while. So I would use dithering only if you really need it, or if you're really good at dithering and you know how to make dithering that's interesting to look. And what's the other one? Was dithering and anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is, I think anti-aliasing is a very specific technique for drawing pixel art. I think I have some tutorials on anti-alias, but that's a thing that's I think it's like more art-specific tutorials we'll cover. But in general, like on the technical side, on the programming side, if you're making pixel art, generally you don't want any anti-alias ever turned on in any part of the engine whatsoever. I mean, on the game world, like on the UI and everything, that's another. If you're using high resolution, then you should use anti-alias in everything you can.
Woodley asked if you do a background foreground panels, do they need to respect the palettes that you choose earlier?
Sorry, I do what?
Woodley asked if you do a background or foreground panels, do you have to respect the palette you choose earlier?
If I respect the palette when doing those, right?
Yep.
I try to, yeah. I mean, depends how strict the game palette is. Again, if it's a very it's a very strict palette, I have to respect it completely always, including for every single asset you have. But if the palette's more like open, then I usually have a more I usually have like different colors for the background. I usually have some colors even that I like to reserve only for background, which are more like toned down, more like low contrast. Like the background should have way less contrast than the foreground in general. Oh, and parallax is also useful for foreground. We never forget that because we have like usually the order is like background, characters, and then foreground, which is in front of the character. So we can have like fog, trees that go, and some grass or something that kinda covers the. So it kinda creates like this depth, which is cool. Okay. So next, let's talk about decals. Decals are basically props or small images that add variation to your game. Not all games have decals, um, or props or everything, but it's an interesting thing that I like to show as to the games that I work with usually, like especially performers. Props are also very like location specific, like the backgrounds. Like there are props that they stay behind the character. There are props that stay in front of the character, and sometimes they usually even have like parallax too and everything. And they're basically like more flexible versions of tile sets. They're images that you can place around. They repeat, but you avoid having like two of the same right next to each other. Um, Sometimes they're animated or not. I love animated because I can just uh, they give like life to the world that you're looking at. All these decals in the back they are for for Skyturn, a game that we never finished. But but yeah, again, it's another like very, let's say, easy process because you don't need to worry about colliders, don't need to worry about anything. The only thing you need to worry is to to not draw too much attention to it. Those props should not look like something that you can collide. So you all again keep it low contrast, keep it not very noisy. For example, I avoid dithering on any of those because dithering draws a lot of attention. Uh, one rule that I like to use for decals or sometimes even for backgrounds is I limit the color count for a very low color count for each sprite. For example, I think these houses, the other than the purple here, or like for this area here, other than the blues, they have like three colors or four colors, something like that. And it's never more than that. Like this is like two colors, like this statue is like three colors or four. Uh, it's always like a low color count, low contrast. And at last, particles and other effects. This is just something that I just like to put, put everywhere again to bring life to game, to give and also to give feedback to the player. Um, for example, like in this, like we have rain. There's a bunch of small like squares everywhere for when you teleport. Um, so it's basically having like usually like very tiny and tiny sprites that have like a very small and simple animation, and you spread them when something happens. Um, it is also important to remember to not overdo it. It's very easy to overdo particles or having like too many complex effects that are kind of that draw too much attention to them. So again, it's a thing that you need to be a little be careful. And also remember to not use transparency if you have a hard color limit. So so yeah, you have to like be aware of those things, like to fake transparency when you can't use it. For example, doing like a little circle and make it hollow to look like a bubble, stuff like that. So you need to remember that particles also follow the rules that you set up for the rest of the game. And basically that's it. I think other than that, always like listening to your game. Um, every game is different. For example, this is a mock-up of a game that I was working on, which like is 90% text and it's fully pixel art, and it's a terrible idea. And it was working on the art side. Um, so break some rules sometimes, but know that what you're doing. Like know that what are you trying to bend. Know what you're what they're trying to do, and sometimes the game will kind of tell you what it needs, in a sense that you will try something, you will um, explore something there, and if it works, works. If it doesn't, you will probably know. Yeah.
We have a question from
Mhm.
Oxenart, and I think someone else asked it too. He wanted to know if the dark sludge in Celeste, in the hotel, was hand animated.
I think originally, yes, we started with a hand animation, but later we changed it to be somewhat procedural. I mean, I think it's a mix. No, it's not hand animated, the final one for sure. I think it's a bunch of small sprites that shake, and we have this different sprites for eyes, and we compose everything in the game. Yeah.
Stansane want to ask, have you ever used pixel art sprite in a 3D games like Diary of Spaceport Janitor? And if yes, how do you proceed?
I never did personally. No, I think I made some tech tests. I tried some stuff like on Unity just for fun. I think you would proceed just like basically like any other game, but I think the main difference would be you would have to know that like all sprites are transparent, that they're going to be distorted a lot. Well, I think it depends on again depends on the style, but I think you just do your sprite basically. There's no like big changes. Maybe some you need to be pay attention about for the illumination, make like the light a little bit generic because it can be from coming from any side, and there'll be like a lot of like redrawing and everything.
Um,
Uh,
sorry, go on.
no, sorry, go,
Okay.
go ahead.
Vladimir want to ask if you think you will be making more tutorials on the future, gift tutorials about pixel art.
I stopped for a while. I'm maybe in the future. I don't have any plans to come back to tutorials right now. I think I did a lot of them already. Mm, and I kind of I got to a point that I didn't really know what to talk about on the tutorials anymore. But if I come up with a new team, maybe a new idea, I might try doing a couple more.
Hmm.
What I might do, what I wrote a couple articles on Medium about how to do pixel art, and those articles are longer, more in depth. For the tutorials, they have like this very um, condensed format, which is it's great for sharing. It's great for quick reference. But I think I feel that I reached like the limit on what I can do next with them. So I think I'm moving towards making maybe more articles explaining things more in depth.
Okay.
Okay.
Mage FF wanted to ask, do you have resources to recommend about understanding values and saturation to make a good foreground background palette?
Yeah, I think I have an article that I wrote about one of my articles. I think I should have a link of that. It's about colors, and but it's honestly it's not that deep about it. Uh, Let me just find it. I think I can paste it in the chat.
Oh, yes, thanks.
I have something about basic color theory. Mm, I I'm using like a really weird keyboard. Sorry, I have no idea how to press enter in this keyboard.
Oh,
Uh, I will do it. Huh. Just a second. Let me get another keyboard. Oh no, I need to. Okay, got it. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Hey, sorry, I have a lot of keyboards.
God.
And so yeah, I just put on. It's like it's a little guide I made about colors. It has some general tips and maybe some resources, but the color is like a very very deep theme that you can really go dive into. I on that article I have I think a little some other links that you can also take a look.
Wait, where did you put the link?
On the chat, on Discord chat.
Oh, Discord chat.
Sorry, no,
Okay.
sorry, no, sorry, on Twitch chat.
Twitch, okay, because I don't see it.
Like Saint 11 as medium.
Oh
I
no,
can...
your link I have been blocked.
I
Could
can
you
send you
send
the...
it to me in the Zoom conversation?
Oh, okay. I have no idea how to do that, but I will figure it
You
out.
have
I found it. Let me see. Sorry, I'm like I have like 2 computers here at the same time.
Oh, okay, don't worry.
Let me see if I can.
Oh yeah, show it to everybody on your screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I usually just Google my name. Yeah, let me see if I can find it. It's the 6th part.
Or maybe you can send it to me.
Oh yeah, I think I shared the wrong. I will. I will send you the link and then we can.
Yeah. You can send it to Egodart.
Yeah, here.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. I have the link. Okay.
Okay.
Phew. All good.
Work?
I think I have another question, and we have 7 minutes more, so maybe it's almost ending. But before that, Kriaki want to know how do you choose the number of images per second for your animation? I'm not sure, but I believe that in general games don't use the same IPS as TV animation.
So so yeah, basically how do I choose the animation speed, right?
Yeah.
I think it depends on what I'm animating. And effect usually I usually do like a very high speed for effects, explosions and stuff like that. I do not use the same notation as traditional animation. I use milliseconds for a sprite, so I can I when people say to me, "Oh, can you send me a 12 frames per second?" I just go to Google and convert it to milliseconds because I have no idea what that means.
Okay.
I mean, I know what it means, but I don't really understand it like intuitively.
Okay.
But something like effects around 60 frames, 60 milliseconds, is lower animations like 100, and like an idle, something very slow, I go like for even 200 depending. But usually, if you want something more fluid, you want something faster.
Okay. So, I
Any
think.
more questions?
Sorry, what?
Yeah, if there are many more questions.
I think we have a little more. Oh, how would you approach doing assets in a full top view perspective?
Full top view. Okay, like something like Hotline in Miami, I imagine.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think this comes back to this slide here, rotating. Because if you're doing full top down, you're probably going to. It's probably because you want to rotate everything. And if you want to rotate everything, get ready because things will break. So what you want is to avoid where's my to avoid like long lines like this because lines will break. But what you want is probably to have like big areas of color, flat color, because those areas will kind of continue the same. Like here the chest, for example. You probably don't want to add too much detail to the silhouette again because the silhouette will be completely broken when you rotate it. So that's generally it. Or if you are really depending on the style you're going for, you can maybe even just redraw the sprite in like all directions. I mean, you only need to redraw on a 90-degree angle, like you make it looking up, and then you make all the variations looking to the right, and then you just flip it and rotate it 90 degrees, which is fine. You can, oh yeah, that's another thing. You can always rotate pixel art in 90 degrees for free without losing anything.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wei want to ask you if you draw with a mouse or with your tablet.
I draw with a tablet. I'm using it right now.
Okay.
It's I know a lot of pixel artists using mouse. I think it's great too. But some people, I think it's more of a personal preference. I think
Yeah.
I like the tablet because it's slightly faster to sketch and everything. But to be honest, sometimes when I'm lazy, when I'm just programming something, I just draw them out really quick and it doesn't look as good, but
Yeah.
for me.
But I suppose pixel art is one of the only art style you can do with the mouse and not with the tablet.
Yeah.
Ludo Marilon want to ask, how do improve your skills? Do you practice sometime with other pixel artists or with specific content, like short times or limited color palette?
Honestly, I don't really a lot. But one thing that I think I usually I did for a while, it was doing the pixel dailies, which is like a challenge on Twitter that people just come up with a theme every day and you just make an image for that. I think like this monkey here was like a pixel daily or something. For it's just like I think the theme was like monkey, and I just drew and animated the monkey, stuff like that. Every day you just draw something. Nowadays, since I've been working with pixel art for so long, I think and 90% of my work uh, involves pixel art, so I just basically draw pixel art every day for the games I'm working on. So that's how I keep practicing. But if you're starting out, I would just say pixel dailies or try looking at tutorials and maybe even copying some stuff just to learn and practice. Just a lot of practice. Practice is probably like any other art form. And also learning to make art that is not pixel art. Pixel art is a medium, kind of like gouache or oil or something, and it's a weird medium because it's so many limitations. So if you know how to draw like pen with like a pen, it really helps you on pixel art and back and forth. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it was our last question, and it's time to end now. But thank you very much, Pedro, for all that you said. It was very, very interesting.
Thank you.
So, people, you can follow Pedro on his Twitter account. You have seen it. He's Cent11. That's it. And thank you very much for coming. Thanks you everyone for being here today. It was the last conference today, so please be with us tomorrow. And well, we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so much. See you around.